What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Two Guys Watching Football podcast. My name is Cole Jackson, and I am joined today by Dan Reese. You'll notice it's not Michael Crawford. Mike is simultaneously doing a film episode with Denard Melton, and that's the beauty about Two Guys Watching Football. It doesn't really matter which two guys it is. So we got Dan joining us. He's DP Reese 8 on Twitter. Dan, how's it going, buddy?
It's going great. I'm excited to be here. Love that you guys are starting this show, and real excited for all the stuff you guys are going to put out. So,
thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah, we're happy to have you on. And I think you and we've gotten to know each other quite a bit over the last year. And one of the goals of this channel is we want to provide opportunities to merge film and analytics. And I know that you kind of come from that analytical perspective, and I go to you all the time for that kind of stuff because it's a world that I don't understand. So could you tell some of our listeners, what's your background? What got you into this kind of interest in the analytical side of Ravens football?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been a Ravens fan for a while. Went to college in Baltimore and became a fan there. My profession, I'm an actuary, so I deal with numbers all the time. And so I'm very heavy, into numbers on a professional basis and just in general. So when I look at football, that's kind of the perspective I have. I've gotten into the data analytics more and more over the last year or two, especially as data has become available. Been working on my, R skills with, NFL Faster and NFL Scraper, really showing all of the available data and just kind of so much information out there that you can dive into. So all that available data is kind of led me to dive into it more and more over the last year or two, and really excited to kind of interact on Twitter with all the film guys like you guys, and it's just great to get all the different perspectives. So really looking forward to learning a lot from you guys with the film, and hopefully can share some analytics knowledge too.
Yeah, that's what we want to do, right? Like it's we were just talking off stream, but it's become this weird dichotomy where it's film versus analytics, and it's I've done a lot of work with King Moose at Yoshi 2052 on Twitter. And what I've learned from him is it's all about the best of both worlds, bringing in different perspectives and merging that into telling a story. And, it's something where I need to learn to kind of open my mind and have those discussions, trying to understand the analytical side. So that's why I appreciate you coming from that perspective so much. And, we're able to build off one another and put things together. And it just creates a better understanding of what we're watching every Sunday, or I should say what we're obsessing over all week.
Exactly. Yeah.
So without further ado, let's get into tonight's topic. So, Ravens flock is going crazy about the Julio Jones trade topic. It comes up about every 2 weeks. So we kind of wanted to move on. I don't think anyone's going to really disagree. Adding Julio Jones to the Baltimore Ravens roster makes them a better team. I think we can all agree there. But the question is, how do we conceptualize that? What is the value trade-off, and what are some ways to look at it? So what we're going to do is look at it from two angles. So first, we're going to start, what's the trade compensation and what would a trade actually look like? And then we're going to jump into the salary cap implications. And that's really where I'll be looking to you. Salary cap scares the crap out of me. You can't watch film on the salary cap. I do my best, but that's where I got to rely on you. So are you ready to jump into it, Dan?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Awesome. So we'll start off with the trade scenarios. And so obviously anytime we're dealing with trade scenarios, it's, we're just putting out ideas and seeing what different values can bring us to. So one of the great ways to kind of conceptualize value is through the Jimmy Johnson trade value chart with draft picks. And I know there's been some interesting work that you've done in terms of taking a player's value and trying to project that to a draft pick to kind of compare and contrast to the draft value chart, which is awesome work. So we kind of just put together a few trade concepts here, and we'll kind of just walk through them. So I'll start off, read the first one. So the first one's pretty similar or simple. It's a 2022 first round pick for Julio Jones. And I think that's kind of what the Falcons are going to be looking for as a starting point. Doesn't mean that's what they're going to get, or if they're, at a hard stop there. But that's what I think they're looking at. So what are we looking at with a JJ value chart there?
Yeah, it kind of depends where where you sit on the first round, but the Ravens were, with the 27th pick, it's around 680 points. So the range of a first round can be huge. So that's the big thing, right? Saying a blanket first round pick is kind of a hard statement, but a late first round pick is probably what at least what the Falcons are looking for. I don't think they're going to get it, but like you said, I think that's going to be their opening offer.
Yeah, this reminds me a lot of the Orlando Brown Jr. talk. I remember I frequently said, like, I'm okay with trading him. I just want the value for him. And it's more about how you value him. And it's kind of a similar discussion, because I think we were all in that mid to late first round draft pick value. And we saw, when you factor in all of the picks that went the other way, he came out at about a mid second round pick, right? If I have that right.
Yeah,
and
I think that's right. Yep.
And so if we look at scenario 2, I think we're looking more at that. So it would be the Ravens giving up a 22 second and a 2022 fourth round pick, and then receiving Julio Jones. And what does that give us for a JJ value?
Yeah, so if you look at those picks based off of a similar range, being the 27th or so team in each round, that'd be 310 points for the second round and 40 points for the fourth round. So a total of 350 points, which is the equivalent of the 55th pick. So that's about middle to late second round. So that'd be a more reasonable counter, I think, from the Ravens' perspective. A late second is kind of with a little bit added on with the fourth, I think is a reasonable counter from the Ravens' perspective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And this is where we could also see, similar to the Brown Jr. trade, with some pick swaps and stuff, for them to kind of, it may not be exactly this, but I think that's what they were looking at, was really finding out, okay, what's that pick value that you end up after all the picks are exchanged. So, and then we'll take a look at one more. And this was one that I put out on Twitter the other day, or I think it was this morning, actually. It was just to kind of, what does it look like if we include a player? So I included Devin Duvernay because I think between him and Miles Boykin, who I think would be the most likely to roster wide receivers to be traded, I think Duvernay carries a little bit more value than Boykin would, just because of not really performance, because I think Boykin did perform quite well, but when you factor in rookie contract years, I think it's completely relevant. So we throw them Duvernay and a 2022 third round pick. And I know this is where it can be tough to kind of determine what the JJ value is of Duvernay to factor into those picks. But, what did you come up with on this one?
Right. So the third round would be something around 136 points. So, if you're equating that to the second scenario, which was a total of 340 points, that would mean that Duvernay would have to be worth around 214 points, which is like the 75th pick. So 75th would be mid third, maybe early third. So, he was a third round pick. It's 1 year in. So, maybe, and I think he's played well. So, I think especially for his draft position. So I think, holding his draft position worth is reasonable. So, I don't think that's out of the range if they are interested in him as a player.
And that's the key point. When I put that out, a good friend of the show, Spencer Schultz at Ravens for Dummies, that's kind of what he hit me back with. And it's not necessarily about Duvernay, but when you're looking at trading for a roster player, obviously Duvernay would have to have value to the Falcons. I personally think he would fit their system quite well, but that's just my opinion. They're going to want to bring in their own guys, and he might not be the right fit. So, let's look at this from a realism perspective, before we jump into preferences and whatnot. So, Dan, in your opinion, and I know you've done a ton of research on trades, like, are any of these three scenarios, realistic, or any more realistic than the others? Like, what do you think about this?
Well, I think scenario one's gone. I think Atlanta has lost all leverage. Julio's come out. He said he wants to be traded. Atlanta is in a terrible cap situation. Terrible. Like, they have no moves left. So, they have to get something done with Julio, basically. in order to have cap working for this year. And then, it's after the draft too. So everyone's already kind of got their roster filled. So teams are less interested. He's a great player, but you're going to have to squeeze him in now. Like the Ravens have a pretty full wide receiver room. So it's going to be very difficult. Pre-draft, they would have been more interested because they could have planned accordingly. They wouldn't have used a first maybe, or at least not a first and a third. So, so I don't think that one's reasonable anymore. I think scenario 3 is more of a stretch, unless they really like Duvernay or really like someone like Boykin. I don't see it. I think that's too little. I think there are going to be enough teams interested in Julio that while they don't have any leverage, they still will have a lot of buyers. So I don't think a third will be enough. So, but I do think scenario 2 is very reasonable. I think the Ravens have 2/3 and I don't know 3/4, something like that. So they have a lot of picks in 2022. So I don't think it's unreasonable to to use some of those day 2 picks and see what they can pull off. So
I completely agree there. And that's where those picks are going to be important, especially as we get into the era of paying Lamar Jackson, because we're going to have to rely on, drafted guys on rookie contracts to fill a lot of roster spots just because of, sheer lack of cap space. But, you can also leverage those to make a major roster upgrade. So I would agree completely. I think that scenario 2 is probably the most realistic. I know some people, especially Falcons fans, probably might say it's not enough. And, I understand where they're coming from with that perspective, but it just really mirrors the Orlando Browns situation for me. And that's why I like that we kind of landed on a similar JJ value. I know it's a little bit more, and that probably makes sense because, we're looking at a top 5 wide receiver when healthy, versus a guy that has a chance to be a top 5, top 7 left tackle, but there was a little less certainty given it was his first year starting there in the NFL. So I think that makes a ton of sense. And then is there one of these options? I'm assuming it's probably 2, but is there one that you prefer more than the other, or would you prefer 3 as just like pure Dan Reese's? Yeah,
I would love 3 because you're going to have to get rid of a wide receiver anyway. So might as well do that. I really like what Duvernay can do based on what I've seen, but we're going to have a roster crunch at the wide receiver position. So if you can kind of get something out of that player, I think that would be fantastic. I don't know if that's going to happen for them, but I have no clue what they're interested in. So I guess we'll see. So.
Yeah, and I kind of bounced around. I was like, what other guys can we throw? Can we maybe throw Ben Powers in there? Like, who do you want? Who do you want? But
right.
I completely agree. I think that like right now we're looking with the 6 wide receiver spot is a battle between Prochet and Boykin. And usually we're used to, a late round pick battling with the UDFA, going back to the Jaleel Scott versus Antoine Wesley battle days. But, now we're looking at a 3rd rounder versus a recent 5th rounder who also has special team value. And it really speaks to how they've upgraded this wide receiver room. So I completely agree. I'd love to use a roster player as some sort of trade value to clear that spot and also limit the amount of draft compensation. But I think we nailed it with the realism discussion. It's probably not something the Falcons are going to look to do, but I really see scenario 2 as a nice middle ground. And with the amount of picks that the Ravens have, I I feel a lot more comfortable giving up a 2nd round pick when I know, we have comp picks coming for Ngakwe and Judon. We got that extra 4th in the trade back this year. We got the 3rd coming for David Culley's hire. So, there's a lot of reinforcements there to justify that. So, that's so, let's say this happens, trade happens. We kind of went over the compensation. Now is where things get tricky. We're going to shift gears and look at the trade implications on the salary cap. Like I said at the start, anyone that follows me on Twitter knows this is not my jam. Numbers hurt my head. So Dan, I'm going to be relying on you to walk us through. So we're going to start, just take a quick look at, what is this contract right now? based off his current extension. So can you just, walk us through here? I know it's pretty straightforward, but just what we're looking at with his current contract.
Sure. And this information is from overthecap.com. Anyone looking for cap numbers, go out there. They have the best numbers, really great source for all things cap related. Any questions around that as well. So any numbers you see around the cap are from there. So this chart is is Julio Jones's current contract. The left column base salary, that's as it says, is base salary. So 2021 has got a base salary of just over 15 million. The prorated bonus, what that is when you have a signing bonus, you prorate it across the length of the contract. So the 7.75 million was prorated probably over 5 years. So what was that? So 7.75 times. So a little bit over 38 million. So that was probably paid in, was likely paid whenever you signed the contract, probably in 2019, and was spread across. So they've got 3 more years left of recognizing 1/5 of that signing bonus. Then the guaranteed salary, that's the guaranteed portion of the base salary. So in 2021, all of his base salary is guaranteed, regardless of what happens. That's why they can't cut him, because they'd still owe that salary. So his cap number is the 15.3 plus the 7.7, and that's the 23 million over under the cap number. So what's going on with them is they want to decrease that cap number. You can't decrease the base salary based off of cutting him or anything like that. So what they're looking to do is trade him, which would move that 15.3 million to the next team. The reason that they have, and where it gets a little bit confusing and everything, is when you trade someone or cut someone or anything like that, the prorated bonus, it gets accelerated. So when you trade someone, now those 3 years of 7.75 million all get accelerated to 2021. The only exception for that is if the event happens after June 1st, then the acceleration happens to next year. So this year's prorated bonus would still be 7.7, and next year's prorated bonus would be 2 years worth of 7.7, so 15.5 million. So they're going to trade. They're looking to trade him, which would decrease the 2021 cap from 23 million down to 7.75 million. The new team would get the 15.3, and the Falcons would still be on the hook for 15.5 million in 2022 on the cap. So basically, they're deferring 15 million into 2022 by waiting until June 1st. So that's why it's been key.
Okay, this is awesome, because this is one thing I think a lot of people didn't understand, is why is it after June 1st it makes the most sense. So I think we covered that, and we also kind of covered why cutting them doesn't make sense for them. So, those are kind of my key takeaways there. It's really looking at, why are we looking at June 1st? Why are they looking to trade specifically? So that's super helpful context right there. And then, let's take a look at the Ravens effective cap space, because, can you give us a rundown of what is effective cap space and what does that all mean? Because this is something that I've kind of just recently learned about, and I think it's really helped me look at cap space more in general.
Sure. So, during the off season, you can take a look at the cap space at any given point. And that'll kind of give you an idea of where things stand now. But at any point, there are, during the off season, there are events that will happen and costs that will happen between now and the beginning of the year. So you can build those into your cap model and say, so for example, we're looking at here, this is kind of where things stand now. So the cap remaining right now is about 8.5 million. That's reflecting what's called the rule of 51. So even though there are 89 players, you only count the top 51 salaries. This also reflects all of the rookies, even though some of them haven't signed yet. So some numbers you may see are a little different. Some of, like, over the cap doesn't reflect all the numbers, or all the rookies until they're actually signed. But anyway, the 8.5 million reflects kind of all the contracts that are done. But then we know that the actual roster is 53 players. So at some point between now and the start of the season, they changed the rules from only having to reflect the top 51 to having to reflect the top 53. So that's 2 more players worth of cap you are going to have to reflect. So that's about 1.7 million in cap space that we know and can plan is going to go away. Additionally, there's things like the practice squad, where there's a minimum number of players and a minimum salary for the practice squad, so you can kind of build that in. 2 million is a kind of a reasonable number that I've seen thrown out there for the practice squad. So both of those things are ways you can reduce the current cap remaining to get a more reasonable actual cap or effective cap. Right now, the numbers you'll see for the cap and the effective cap are pretty close because, we're getting close to the season. But during the off season, you'll see a lot of things happen. When you look at 2022, for example, you'll see a lot of things happen where the cap space will show a much larger number than the effective cap because maybe the team only has 40 players on the roster, and you're going to have to go from 40 to 53. So that's 13 more players you're going to have to pay at least league minimum. So you can drop your cap by 13 times the league minimum, and that'll give you the effective cap. So that's a lot of what's going on with the cap and effective cap space. So that's kind of where Ravens stand right now. Is about $5 million. It's about middle of the pack as far as current cap space. But as we've seen a lot during this offseason, there are a lot of switches and things teams can flip in order to get more cap space. The main two that go on are restructuring or extending. Restructuring is basically changing the base salary into a signing bonus, so then you can do the proration. And extending is doing that, but extending a contract out to 5 years, so you have a longer time to prorate it out. Looking at the Ravens, if you look at where they stand, let's see. If you adjust it so that you reflect all the possible restructures for any players that are at least $4 million in salary cap, so any meaningful salaries, they dropped from being in the middle of the pack to having the 27th most cap space. So they've already used most of their plays, most of their wild cards or whatever, and don't have many moves left. So that kind of, we're going to see that later on when we look at what happens with Julio. But they really are kind of running out of moves to make. So.
Yeah, and this is perfect because a lot of people see that $8.5 million, and they're kind of like, if we're talking in the context of a Justin Houston signing, it's like, well, we could just give him a 1 year, $8 million contract. We have $8 million, and then
right.
Guys like our good friend Brian McFarland at Ravens Salary Cap, they kind of say, well, no. And that's kind of where I've seen this effective salary cap come up. And I think it's just so much better to work off of that because you're factoring in what the team is working off of, and it just gives us a stronger understanding. So that's awesome that we went through that. Now we're going to take a look at 2 scenarios so trade happened, Julio Jones coming to Baltimore, everybody wins. Ravens Twitter wide receiver crew is going bananas right now. But what are two ways we could do something with Julio's contract? So we're gonna take a look at the first one here. So run us down here. What did we do in scenario 1, and just give us a rundown of what the moves were made to get to this spot.
Sounds good. All right. So scenario one, we didn't do anything with Julio's contract. You can see on the right, he comes across with the $15.3 million base salary. The Ravens are not on the hook for any of the prorated bonus. That all stays with Atlanta. So we've got a cap number for 2021 of $15.3 million. That's in the light green line, a cost of $15.3 million. The corresponding cap move below rule of 51 is you only have to account for the top 51 players. So by adding someone high like Julio, you actually drop someone off. So we drop someone that the 51st player is making $870,000. So you get to offset that by Julio's contract. So that's one nice thing. The next move that we did was we restructured all existing contracts for large players. So anyone above $4 million of a cap hit, we restructured. So we changed the base salary as much as we could to a signing bonus and prorated that across the remainder of the contract. That gives $11.8 million of cap space to the Ravens in 2021. That doesn't actually save Ravens real money. It just defers that $11.8 million to a later year, depending on how many years left are on those contracts. So if we reflect those three lines, and again, the end of Rule 51 and the practice squad, we've got a little bit over $2 million in cap remaining. That seems to work out. The one thing to worry about is that we've got $2 million left, and that has to last the whole season. With any injuries, any promotions mid-season, and inevitably something is going to happen injury-wise. And if you have already fired all your bullets with restructuring every contract, you don't have anything else to do during mid-season in order to create more room to pay for those new players to replace injuries and things like that. So, it seems like, we've got to $2 million, we're fine, but that's really not going to be enough for the Ravens to go through the full season.
Exactly. And so that is helpful because, I was going to ask you a couple questions here, but I think it might be best if we run through scenario two because it's a much different approach. So let's run to scenario two and walk us through that. And then we'll put them both side by side and take a look.
Sounds good. So on this end, what we did was we kind of took the opposite approach and we restructured Julio Jones's contract. So you can see on the right, we adjusted his 2021 base salary down to the veteran minimum of just over $1 million, and we prorated the remaining about $14.2 million. So we stayed with the same amount, $15.3 million, that he's due in 2021. We just took about 14.3 and turned it into a signing bonus, and that gets prorated over the 3 years remaining. So that drops his cap number in 2021 just under $6 million. It increases his cap number in 2022 and 2023 because you've got those prorations hitting. So you're saving this year and costing, delaying that charge until future years. So if you look at the cap impact, you've got signed Julio Jones about $6 million, corresponding cap move, getting back $870,000 again. And you can see at the cap remaining, we're actually short about $200,000. So this move gets us close, but not quite there. And there's really not much else you can do to Julio's contract, to spread more money. You could add void years, but that's not something the Ravens have done in the past, and I don't see them doing it now.
Right. And so I'm going to throw them up side by side because I think this creates an interesting discussion. So, we've kind of looked at how can we do it without touching Julio's contract? And then we looked at it if we only touch Julio's contract. So if we kind of put the two scenarios together to do a little mixing and matching, if we go with scenario two and we do that restructure with Julio, we kick his money down the road and he has those 16 mil cap hits for the next 2 years. But then what the Ravens, if you correct me if I'm saying this wrong, because that's always what I look to you guys for, is it fair to say that what we could do is then, because I know we can restructure Ronnie Stanley and clear up about $5 million. So that gives you about your kind of in-season rainy day fund. And then if they did need more, or if they needed more as they went, they could kind of go into those additional restructures as the season goes on, right? Like, so if we get to a point, we could then restructure a guy like Tavon Young and kind of use that money as the effective cap space. Am I saying that correctly?
Yep, that's okay. Right. Yeah, so realistically, that's probably what they're would do. They would have to do more than Julio, like we saw. So you'd have to restructure someone, and then as you go through the year, if you needed more money, you could restructure some of those other ones. You have to remember, as you go through the year, you're spending money, you're spending their base salary. So it's less and less that you're going to be able to, move to a signing bonus. So if you're halfway through the year, you've now got half as much money that you can turn into a signing bonus. So, you're still only paying half the amount for a new player, but you've got to just think about that in the timing. So you probably don't want to go in with zero. So you want to go in with, you may do extra adjustments going into the season.
And so if we look at this from another perspective and we look at scenario one where they do all these other restructures and they're comfortable kicking that money down the road, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but I'm kind of curious in your thoughts, is there a way that they could restructure Julio's deal without kicking so much into future years to kind of create that effective cap space? Like if they kick some down, is there flexibility when they do that restructure?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. You can do anything up to the amount shown on the right. So you can't move any more than the 14.2 because his base salary has to be at least 1.075 million because he's a veteran. So you can change his base salary to anything above that. So if you want to say you've got the 15 or out of the 15.3 million, you want to keep his base salary at 5 million. Then you've got 10.3 that you turn into a signing bonus and prorate that. So that drops you down to 3.4 plus 5, so that's 8.4 million. So you save $7 million in deferred costs for Julio instead of the 10 million here. So you can play around with how much you want to defer Julio's money or the other players, and it's just a matter of the risk, which player you want to take a risk, because deferring costs is not as big of a deal if the player is there every year, because then you're not changing any of the total amount of money spent. It's just when you paid it. But if if he gets hurt and you cut him, then you've got a big cost in year 2 or something like that. So you want to be careful where you're deferring things for riskier players. So.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. So in theory, and yes or no question, in theory, can the Ravens make this happen?
Yes.
We did
it. Yeah. Yep. But there are a lot of things. It's a stretch. They will not be able to do other things very easily. Justin Houston would be kind of out of the picture, so that's something to think about. They would be done making moves. They would be pushing a lot of money into the future years, so that's going to impact contracts negotiations for 2022 with a ton of free agents out there on our team, as well as other teams available due to 1-year contracts in 2021. So spending a lot of 2022's money is not great. So it's kind of up to the front office whether they think they need him. That's, I think, what it really comes down to.
Yeah, and I think that really plays into the idea is 2021 the all year in, and is this the all in year, and is this the all in move that they want to make, or is that move adding an edge player or saving the money that they could spend, and maybe it comes in a trade like what they did with Yannick, even though it came mid-season, because I know that lowered his cap hit that we took on because it was prorated over the year with the week that we traded for him. So that's something to consider too. And I guess one of the questions that came up on Twitter that intrigued me, and I know you've looked into some forecasting, and I know you may not have exact numbers, but if we did this approach where we're kind of kicking Julio's money down the road, and that's now a large cap hit in 2022 and 2023, how much would that impact, from your opinion and what you've looked at, re-signing a guy like I'm not worried about Lamar Jackson. They will be signing Lamar Jackson. I don't think that this really plays into it, but what it plays into, for me at least, is Mark Andrews. Like, is that going to block their ability to get a Mark Andrews deal done without severely, backloading it so that it's kind of, big cap years in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, so if you look at where they stand right now for 2022, the projected cap is a little bit over 200 million based on over the cap, and the Ravens are currently 35 million under based off of the adjusted cap space like we talked about, and that already reflects the 23 million for Lamar because they've already done the 5-year extension. So even if they do an extension, the number would probably be there or less, depending on how they structure the money. But say we leave it at 23 million for Lamar, that leaves us at 35 million, projected cap space. So the 35 million, you've got, let's see, in scenario 1, we've got 11 million gone. Scenario 2, we've got 16 million gone. And, in scenario 1, in addition to the 11 million, we've got a portion of that 11.8 million of restructured. Not all of it necessarily, because some of it could have been pushed to the beyond 2022. But it is going to be a significant portion of that. So, we probably are looking at something like 25 billion, it is gone in 2022 for Julio in order to fit him into this year and put him, 20 to 25 million, I would say. So that's a significant chunk of the cap. I think it depends what you think about Andrews, where he's going to land, but 10, 15 million probably, that's quite a bit, maybe lower for the first year. So I think it would make it very challenging. I think there are a ton of free agents that the team has to sign, and I think it will be challenging, depending how it all fits together. But I think this move really is kind of an all-in move for 2021 because it really puts the team in a bind for 2022 cap-wise.
Yeah, and this is basically what I do with my credit card all the time. I just keep kicking money on there, and someone pays it eventually. I don't know if it's me or someone else, but but that's why I kind of see option number 2 as like probably the most sense, because then you're just kind of restructuring and kicking further money down the road, quote unquote, on the fly. I know they're probably going to be a little bit more strategic than that, but it's the idea that you're not restructuring everybody and then still having to restructure Julio. But I mean, I guess the key is, in order to get this done and make that, theoretically, yes, we have to kick money down the road. And so, and quite a bit of it. And so it's going to impact future roster building. It's going to impact future, free agent acquisitions that they could potentially make. Guys like a Kevin Zeitler may not be able to be added in the future. And so I guess if we're looking at this from, should the Ravens do it? I guess the question really is, how good does he make them? Does he really put them over the top? We could argue about this for days, but I think it's something that it kind of reminds me of the Orlando Brown Jr. situation, where there's smoke, there's fire, and it just keeps coming up, and the Ravens keep getting mentioned. And I personally thought it would stop after the draft because, they went and got a first and a fourth rounder, and there's still smoke. So it's something that I think they're keeping tabs on. I think they're letting people know that, whether that's just to drive the price up, I don't know, but they're going to stay interested, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with this one. But we're going to end it there. Dan, any last words on this? What would be your approach here?
Yeah, I think it just comes down to whether it makes the difference for the team, make or break. I think it is a huge move. Honestly, I don't think I'm surprised that the Ravens have been in this conversation for this long. Maybe seeing them as high in the betting markets as where he'll end up is really surprising to me. I think there are so many other teams better positioned with need and money than the Ravens that I don't see how they would compete. But if they want him, there's a way. So it really comes down to what the front office thinks. So, it'll be interesting for sure to see where he ends up, and how much he has left in his tank, and how big of a difference he makes. So.
Yeah, and that's actually something I did want to touch on, because I saw the tweet you had yesterday, I believe it was, about Ryan Tannehill's restructure and how the Titans might make sense. So could maybe just quickly give us a rundown on that scenario and why the Titans might make the most sense as a contender for Julio?
Yeah, if I were to bet, I would bet the Titans. They just seem to fit with the wide receiver need now to go along with AJ. Cap space, if you look at it right now, they have under $4 million. So we think, wait, how are they going to fit it in? But they have a ton of moves to make with restructures. They can get over $40 million of cap space just by restructures. Compare that to the Ravens, which we saw was like $20 million. So, just restructuring Tannehill alone, which doesn't really change them because they're not likely going to move on from Tannehill anytime soon. So, that's a reasonable thing for them to do. Gives them a ton of space and they can easily fit him in. So a pretty easy move for them. They still have more moves just in case anything happens, and it really rounds out their offense into being really scary. So I would love for it not to happen, but I'm afraid that's he's gonna end up.
Yeah, thank God we have our secondary, or else we might be seeing some logo stomping in Baltimore sometime soon. But that makes a ton of sense, because we look at it from what can the Ravens do, and then you look at other teams that obviously can make these moves that aren't necessarily on the surface, just like the Ravens moves aren't. But there's other ways other teams can create that space, and they don't have to kick as much money down the road. So I would say, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily who does make the most sense, because that's not really how this works. It's really going to be who's going to make that investment and who's going to take that, that gamble, in the sense of, you might, from the Ravens perspective anyway, you might lose someone down the road to pull this off, but at least, you're making that kind of addition. So, we want to hear from you guys. If when you're watching, use the comment section below. Be sure to like the video if this is the type of content you want to see in the podcast series. I'm going to be kind of testing things out like this, and if that like button helps me know, would you like, would you not like. Find us on Twitter. I'm at Cole Jackson FB. Michael Crawford, my partner, at A Bukhari, and then also you can find Dan on Twitter at DPReese8. Let us know what you think, and if you want to find your way back, hit that subscribe button. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other. Peace out.